And tonight I was having a hard time deciding what I wanted to discuss when it comes to what's trending, what's going on in our current news cycle. It's kind of almost been slow, in my opinion, just from the standpoint of the fact I can only cover the same kind of topics so much before I get bored of them. I was looking into what's been going on with Epstein, and there's more to reveal there, and I'll do that probably tomorrow. But I didn't want to do another Epstein stream tonight. And then on top of it, I was looking at what's going on with the government shutdown, and it's just like, we'll see what happens with that tomorrow too, in all honesty. Sometimes Mondays seem to be pretty tough when it comes to news cycle stuff because we're just coming off the weekend and I'm still waiting to see the entire day of Monday end before I decide what kind of an effect it had. So ultimately what I've decided to discuss today, twofold. Ed Martin. Not many people are going to recognize the name, but he's actually very important, and people are going to be, Republicans that is, MAGA, are going to be quite disappointed when they learn what happened today within the Trump Department of Justice. Yet again, another disaster occurring in this Trump administration, in my opinion, similar to what we saw with Greg Bovino up in Minnesota, and I'm going to draw parallels with that, some striking similarities. Once again, midterms are upon us, and this is what we're getting. So Ed Martin, there's news on him, and then I also am going to end the stream later on by discussing Dan Bongino and his official return to podcasting. I'm going to cover everything that he said. I checked out about 30 minutes of the Dan Bongino podcast return, listened to what he had to say, and I'm going to give my critical feedback on that and point out a couple of things. So that's where we're going to start. First and foremost, if you're tuning in right now, be sure to give the stream a like. It truly helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. And without further ado, Trump's attack dog. This is who Ed Martin was. Trump's attack dog. This is the guy that we were looking towards when it came to moving the needle towards the Trump agenda, pushing forward for what we actually want. And what do we actually want? What did we actually vote for President Donald Trump for? We want justice, immigration reform, deep state arrests, and outright retribution against the Democrats who waged weaponized lawfare against conservatives and against President Donald Trump himself. And Ed Martin was the guy pretty much assigned to that. Early last year, I should say, Attorney General Pam Bondi ultimately wound up creating this group. This was before everybody hated her. She was very newly appointed. And she created this group called the Weaponization Working Group. Ed Martin originally was tasked with the assignment of leading that group, and his job was to press people. It was to go after all of the corruption, all of the deep staters. This was his job. And all last year, under the radar, a lot of these stories went with Ed Martin, but all last year he made several attempts to do so. So the WWG is what I'm going to refer to it. The WWG, the Weaponization Working Group. It was originally set up to go after those who weaponized the law against Trump and his supporters, voters even. And we saw multiple examples of that. Ed Martin's job was to comb through the FBI. His job was to comb through, what else do I have? The DOJ itself, and even the IRS is what I have here. He was to comb through this, and he was to find people who were weaponizing the law against Republicans, conservatives, born-again Christians in some cases, like we saw with the IRS, and ultimately President Trump himself. He made several attempts to. I mean, all last year, there were little reports. There aren't mainstream reports on what he was doing. You didn't get to hear a whole lot about it. But if you really research it, you really see what was going on. He made several attempts to do just that. He was a MAGA loyalist, and this is the startling trend that we're seeing with people like Ed Martin. It seems like Trump's best guys are the ones being sidelined right now under midterm pressures. This is a guy who was hell-bent on fulfilling that agenda. I actually have some examples here of what Ed Martin tried to do. Ultimately, what he wound up doing was upsetting the higher-ups, that being Pam Bondi, and in most of these cases, actually, it was Pam Bondi's Assistant Attorney General, Todd Blanche. We're going to get to him in a second here because there's a lot wrong with Todd Blanche, and this is why there's a bottleneck in the DOJ. We're going to cover that in a second. But I have a few examples of just what Ed Martin tried to do all throughout 2025 as Trump's attack dog, as the head of the Weaponization Working Group. First and foremost, Ed Martin originally, right off the bat pretty much, attempted to send a probing letter to an FBI agent who was suing or who had sued Alex Jones over the Sandy Hook defamation incident. And so Ed Martin was right on the case right away. Ed Martin's also been photoed with Alex Jones, so probably a little bit of a biasy there, probably hooking up his bro, in all honesty, trying to square things away for Alex Jones, but rightfully so. Alex Jones was persecuted by the system, unfairly so, and they used Sandy Hook bullshit to be able to essentially strip away Alex Jones's wealth entirely. It was criminal, in all honesty. Very criminal, very unnecessary, blown out of proportion, and straight up a weaponization of the DOJ is what we saw against Alex Jones. Ed Martin attempted to do that and was pretty much immediately shunned at the time by Todd Blanche. And Todd Blanche, again, I'll cover him in a minute, but Todd Blanche is one of the names to remember when it comes to the Trump DOJ, because Todd Blanche is, in some cases, I believe, worse than Pam Bondi, possibly. I always refer to Pam Bondi as the bottleneck of the Trump DOJ. Ultimately the buck stops with her, and it really does stop with her. She's been nothing but in the way, and she's gotten very little done. But Todd Blanche, in some ways, might actually be worse than Pam Bondi. And I'm going to explain that here in a second, but you're going to see the recurring theme of this man as I give you examples of what Ed Martin was trying to accomplish last year, but ultimately couldn't. Just ultimately couldn't. And it all started with the Alex Jones incident. It all started with Ed Martin trying to send probing letters out to the FBI agent who sued Alex Jones. He was trying to dig up information on this guy to see if he could get the case overturned, I think, for Alex Jones. That's my speculation there. But that was shunned by Todd Blanche. Todd Blanche called it a PR nightmare. Didn't want Ed Martin doing anything centered around Alex Jones. No defending Alex Jones, despite Alex being a friend to Ed Martin, and more importantly, in all honesty, Alex Jones is a friend to President Trump himself. And that's what also bothers me with this current administration, is it seems like those who are the most loyal to Trump, those who are Trump's closest friends even, for some reason have been isolated against him, or far from him, I should say. So it's very interesting. The second thing that Ed Martin notably attempted to accomplish last year was centered around Letitia James. Letitia James, of course, being the New York State Attorney General and one of the most infamous lawfare warriors, I guess we'll call them, against President Donald Trump, especially during the Biden regime. Letitia James, of course, was on record saying that the entire point of her appointment to New York State Attorney General was to go after President Donald Trump. She said she would make it her sole mission, basically, to go after him. It is and was, most importantly, her main focus. And now that the tables have turned, now that Trump's in office, we should be seeing Letitia James on hot coals. We should be seeing multiple public appearances from her. We should be seeing her feeling the pressure of this administration. And in all honesty, she hasn't been feeling much pressure at all. A little bit here and there, but not much at all. Hello, George Dimmick. Welcome to the stream. By the way, I see viewers are coming in. Be sure to like the stream right now if you haven't already. It truly helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. And subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. Make sure notifications are turned on. Do you dislike Trump? At this point in time, yes, overall. I voted for him, but that doesn't. I'm not a MAGA cultist. I'm easily able to place myself in the position of criticizing this administration, and rightfully so. Very, very important to criticize people, especially if you vote for them. Criticizing people you don't for should be expected. Like, I was very critical of Biden, obviously. I thought he was a fucking moron. And he was one of the worst presidents this country's ever seen. But that's to be expected. It's expected that liberals will criticize Trump. But when you vote for somebody, you should be able to take yourself to the point where you can criticize that person. That's important. So, anyways, regarding Letitia James, Ed Martin publicly called for, after she was under investigation for possible alleged mortgage fraud, he publicly made a statement suggesting that Letitia James should resign from her position. And in doing so, put more public pressure and heat on Letitia James, basically making her look worse to the public. This also was heavily shunned by Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi, who scolded him apparently for this. Pam Bondi even apparently on the record saying that it violated DOJ rules when it came to publicizing political perspectives or whatever it was. And so you could just see how soft internally this Trump Department of Justice is, especially compared to the Biden Department of Justice. They have no problem wielding. Trump has no balls, says Kung Fu Chick. I agree. I agree. I'm wondering where his balls are right now, Kung Fu Chicken '08. I am. This is not, this current Trump, he's old, he's tired, and it's kind of pitiful at this point. It really is. And that's why I'm on here criticizing him so much. It's not because I have TDS, it's not because I didn't vote for him. I did. I just want so much more than what we're getting. So, I'm with you. I'm from Iran, by the way, says Mohammed. Okay? All these losers should have been in jail last year. I agree, Kung Fu Chicken. I agree. Waltz should have been arrested months ago. Tell me about it. It's pathetic. It is. 1,200 prisoners missing from... Who cares? They probably got deported. We get it, bro. You have a poster of Tim Waltz in your room and you sit down to pee. Peter... Liberal Triggerer? Nice name. All right, anyways, back to the point, guys. Back to the point. By the way, please be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. So, you can tell how soft this administration is based off of the fact that Ed Martin publicly called for Letitia James, someone who is allegedly guilty of mortgage fraud. And let me tell you something. I sat down to read all of the public records on Letitia James, all of her real estate info that's made public. And I'm telling you right now, I can't 100% say she's guilty of mortgage fraud, but I can pretty confidently say she very likely is. And the fact of the matter is a lot of wealthy people are guilty of such fraud. But at the end of the day, Letitia James, the irony of this was she was getting taken down or was supposed to be taken down for the same thing she came after Trump for. And now this DOJ is just completely failing. They've dropped the ball with people like James Comey. They've dropped the ball with people like Letitia James. We still have no deep state arrests, and we are now literally just days away from it being 1 year since the Trump DOJ was appointed and approved, and Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, etc. So it's very disappointing, and you can see this record now with Ed Martin, who's been sidelined by this Trump DOJ. Of course, the guy actually trying to get shit done, sidelined. The attack dog, the MAGA loyalist. This guy was part of the Stop the Steal in 2020. That's how loyal he was. He was there. He was there. He was an outspoken advocate for the J6ers who were wrongfully politically persecuted and imprisoned cruelly. He was there for them. He was also there when it came to Stop the Steal in 2020. He was right by Trump's side, and now he's being sidelined. He was the one pushing for probing into the FBI agent who sued Alex Jones over the Sandy Hook defamation. And he was also the one who viciously went out there and said Letitia James should resign in shame over this mortgage fraud investigation. And he was shunned in both of those cases by his superiors in the form of Assistant Attorney General Todd Blanche, who I'm going to get to in 1 second, like I said. When you find out about Todd Blanche, you'll be even more outraged at this Trump DOJ. And also by Pam Bondi herself on occasion, who apparently didn't like Ed Martin's aggressive style. I guess these guys above him think he's reckless, can't be controlled, and is a bad image for the Trump DOJ. And so there's that. And then also I have here, Ed Martin would then go on to lobby prosecutors and steer an investigation into more mortgage fraud allegedly committed by Adam Schiff. So once again, we're all sitting here right now with our thumbs up our asses, the people who are conservatives, the people who want to see deep state arrests. We're all sitting here right now wondering, by God, it is February 2nd. Pam Bondi, I don't remember the exact day, but Pam Bondi was appointed to her position in February. We're coming up on the day marking 1 year since she became Assistant Attorney General, and we've gotten no deep state arrests. She's managed to arrest Don Lemon. That's what we've gotten. Comey wasn't even officially arrested. He was allowed to walk in of his own accord, plead not guilty, and then leave. And that was that. That's what we got out of Comey. And by the way, even if he was found guilty, it was a contempt of Congress charge, and it would have been his first case of that. He would have never seen the inside of a prison cell regardless. He would have faced a fine at most, and we won't even be getting that. So all we've gotten is some black gay reporter, literally Don Lemon, being arrested for storming into a church, which, by the way, I didn't like that he did that. But it's like, that's a minnow up the river. We want the big fish. We want the sturgeon. We want the giant catfish. We want the deep state, the deep staters. We want the corrupt motherfuckers. And Letitia James isn't even the half of it in truth, but it would have been a much better start. James Comey would have been a great start. We didn't get either of those. And we have people inside like Ed Martin, actual Trump attack dogs, earnestly attempting to get shit done, being scolded each and every time. Now, when it comes to Adam Schiff, steering an investigation into the alleged mortgage fraud with Adam Schiff, and lobbying prosecutors to go after him. According to the reports here, Todd Blanche was furious at this and called it, to Ed Martin's face apparently, an unnecessary risk. It's an unnecessary risk, according to Todd Blanche, the number 2 guy in the Trump Department of Justice, to go after Adam Schiff for mortgage fraud. Did the Biden DOJ look at going after the former fucking president of the United States, Donald Trump, for mortgage, for real estate fraud, and for everything else they went after with his taxes and apparently holding government documents, secret documents in his Mar-a-Lago state? Did they look at what they did as an unnecessary risk? No, the fuck they didn't. And within the first year of the Biden DOJ, they got results. I say this all the time now, and I'll continue saying it. I'm jealous of the Democrats and how they play the game. As somebody who, like me, who's actually good at chess, good at strategy, I've always loved strategy games. Let me tell you something. The Democrats have the winning formula when it comes to strategy because they know how to wield power. And this is why I'm so mad at Pam Bondi. This is why I say all the time that the attorney general position should never be in the hands of a woman. Because what we're seeing here is somebody like Todd Blanche, the number 2 guy who's a man, really leading the way in all of this. Seems to be making a lot of the choices. Seems to be scolding a lot of people like Ed Martin here who are earnestly trying to get shit done for us. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi, and I think this is partly by design. You know, the whole women can never be held accountable thing. They're good at dodging accountability. I've said this before, too. When it comes to Pam Bondi and the DOJ, Pam Bondi, no doubt, is afraid of Democrat retaliation. She's a woman. She's afraid. She doesn't have the same courage that a man would have in that position. It's just how it's going to be. And she's afraid, and that's why nothing's gotten done. Arresting Don Lemon is not going to put her on the back end of retaliation in the future if Democrats regain control. But going after a attorney general in the form of Letitia James, former FBI director James Comey, that's much more serious. And God forbid, we get a big name like Bill Clinton. I don't know. The guy who showed up in the Epstein files literally over 5,000 times, I think it is. Or how about the fact that he's corrupt? We can link all of this corruption now to Hillary Clinton. How about Obama himself and Russiagate? All of the stuff being released by Tulsi Gabbard. If, God forbid, you asked Pam Bondi to arrest a giant name like that, the true deep staters, the heads of the deep state, she'd probably have a heart attack. She's not planning on doing any of that. That's the reality of this. And I think this is by design where Todd Blanche seems to be making a lot of these choices because he's going to be her fall guy. Should she need it, he'll be the fall guy on top of it. But also the dynamic is working as such where he's the man. Todd Blanche is the man, Pam's the woman. Todd Blanche is clearly, in my opinion, I think he is sabotaging the DOJ, willingly or unwillingly. And I think he's making a lot of terrible decisions. And I think Pam Bondi is mostly content to sit back and allow it. And I'm going to cover Todd Blanche in 1 second. I've got information on him that a lot of people aren't aware of. A lot of people don't even know the name Todd Blanche. You know, there's mainstream politics, and then there's the layer underneath. And that layer tends to matter a lot more, in all honesty. So I'm going to cover that in 1 second. But I'm going to take a look at some chats here. Catch up on the chats a little bit, guys. Chats are moving fast, as always. I liked talking to you yesterday, says Scruffy901. Thanks, man. I sort of remember you. I can't remember if you were one of the more sarcastic trolls or not. But either way, you're welcome here. You're welcome here. Keep tuning in. Appreciate it. Be sure to like the stream, by the way, if you haven't already. Truly helps the stream perform well in the algorithm. Let's see. Let's see here. James, are you unhinged? What are you talking about? On September 12th, 2025, 38-year-old Silvio Villegas Gonzalez was shot and killed by an unnamed ICE agent. Okay. Need the full context there. I'm willing to bet that Silverio Villegas Gonzalez wasn't shot for no reason. I voted for ICE to be doing what they're doing, and I'm overall proud of them. Most dudes with low T and high E are unhinged. I would actually say that's the opposite, in all honesty. Testosterone is what makes men men. Do not resist arrest ever, says Hero. Hell yeah. Freddie was beaten by 6 cops, disarmed, and then shot by those 6 cops. Oh, what are we talking about Preddy for in this chat? Who cares about that guy? That guy was literally a nobody. The world doesn't miss him. Canada has had one female prime minister, Kim Campbell, who served briefly from June to November 93. Interesting. Let's go Team ICE. Fuck ICE. No, ICE for the win. Trump is in the files. Preddy got what he earned, absolutely. And I've covered Preddy at length. I'm not going to continue to cover Alex Preddy on this channel. I've covered it at length. You can go back and watch prior episodes. It's time to move on from that psychopathic loser, okay? That's really what he was. He was a psychopath. He was a loser. He had nothing going for him in his life. He was so ugly that they had to use AI to beautify him, to allow people to feel more sympathy towards him. I mean, it's all a sham, all right? I mean, it's embarrassing. Hopefully nobody else, listen, look at Alex Preddy as an example of what not to do. This is not how you want to be remembered in life. Truly humiliating. Anyways, back to what's going on here in the Trump DOJ. With Ed Martin now being sidelined, literally being pulled out of the weaponization working group. This was the group tasked, like I said at the beginning of this stream, this is the group tasked by Pam Bondi and President Donald Trump at the beginning of their term here to go after all of those guilty of using lawfare against Republicans, conservatives, born-again Christians even, the IRS, the DOJ, the FBI. Ed Martin trying to get stuff done, couldn't. The ultimate block here, the roadblock being Todd Blanche, and in some cases, Pam Bondi. Who is Todd Blanche? Well, I've got some information on him. This is something people don't know. Like you probably don't know the name, and even if you do, you might not know the background. So Todd Blanche represented President Donald Trump in 2023 when Trump was a victim of the Biden lawfare, alongside Pam Bondi even. Pam Bondi was working out of Florida as well as the Attorney General at the time and also represented President Donald Trump. This is how Trump knew these two people and ultimately grew familiar enough with them to become the number one and number two in his DOJ currently. So Todd Blanche was one of the main guys defending Trump against Biden. But what's very fascinating about Todd Blanche is, for all of his life, as far as I can tell, I'll say at least most of it, Todd Blanche was a registered Democrat in New York State. And so he was a registered Democrat up until either 2023 or early 2024, where he switched parties after representing President Donald Trump. And what can you say about that at that point, right? I just spent the last 20 minutes, honestly, giving you examples of how Todd Blanche seems to be the driving force in this administration when it comes to the DOJ. He seems to be the repeat name that pops up as the hindrance here when it comes to people like Ed Martin, who's known as the Trump attack dog, a MAGA loyalist in Ed Martin, the guy that was tasked after getting retribution, in all honesty, on the Democrats. That was Ed Martin's job. And so what can you say about this? Todd Blanche seems to be the opposing force. He's been a registered Democrat for most, if not all of his life out of New York State up until literally 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. He represents Trump against the Democrats. Now all of a sudden he's a Republican. Maybe you can give him the benefit of the doubt and say, well, his eyes must have been open to the savagery and the corruption of the Democrats. Maybe you can say that, but I'm not sold on that. And at the end of the day, it makes you wonder. And I actually made a video on this. I am so ahead of everybody. I'm literally so ahead of everybody on this channel, which is why people should be subscribing to it. I made a video many months ago in 2025 about how the DOJ very likely has a mole, and I specifically pointed to Todd Blanche. You should go check out that video on my channel. It was months ago. Of course, like any long-form video on YouTube nowadays, I'm sure it was throttled or not given a lot of views. It probably has like 30 views on it. But I'm just right. I'm just correct about everything, which is why you need to be subscribed here at American Advocates. I'm the only one here on YouTube reporting this way. You can go watch MAGA cheerleader channels. They'll talk to you about the stock market all day and how well it's doing, yada, yada, yada. Here's the real deal of what's going on, though. That's what this channel's all about. It's to criticize and it's to remind us all of what Trump promised us. And to be honest with you, it's to remind us all that we're not really getting any of that or a lot of it, and we're not getting it fast enough. So Todd Blanche, a registered Democrat out of New York, literally acting as like a nerfing mechanism within the Trump DOJ, it seems. I have to emphasize that. It seems. I've called Pam Bondi the bottleneck, and ultimately she is, because ultimately she's in charge of the DOJ. So everything stops with her or begins with her. But if Todd Blanche is content to sit right underneath her and sort of run the show from underneath in a lot of ways and sort of act as the roadblock to people like Ed Martin, then what we have going on here is a woman who's appointed to the most important position in the DOJ, Pam Bondi, who's content to play softball with Democrats once again And underneath her, we have a guy who, best case scenario, is a new Republican with old Democrat tendencies, and worst case scenario is truthfully still just a Democrat, and then therefore sabotaging all of the efforts being made in this much more conservative Department of Justice. That's who Todd Blanche is. Okay? And that's what's most important to remember here, right? We have two bottlenecks, essentially, and they're both the top positions in the DOJ. That's what's so frustrating here. Excuse me, let me sip some water. 60 viewers. Like this stream. Like this stream. It helps the stream perform well. Give this stream a like. I'll take a look at a few more chats. I want to bring up something after I take a look at some more chats here. I want to bring up something that I'm noticing. I'm going to tie this in, this whole Ed Martin being sidelined thing. There's rumors from CNN that Ed Martin's going to be fired or quit now. He's mulling over retiring. And, you know, I'm going to tie that in with something else that happened very recently in this Trump administration. Very similar. And then I'm going to ultimately correlate all of it for you. Let me take a look at some chats. Jazzy Smith 9636, conservative estimate for Trump's second term so far, at least 15 billion to 20 billion in commitments. Baseline annual aid plus major arms spikes and emergency support approvals. All of this for Israel. Yeah, I've covered this before. I'm not a super Israel hater like I know a lot of far right-wingers are, but I'll say this. You know, the fact of the matter is I do view AIPAC as a bit of a problem in our politics, honestly. I view almost every super PAC, in all honesty, as a massive problem in our politics. It doesn't allow our politics to remain grassroots, and that's actually bothersome. The fact that if you want to run for any major position in this country that has real power, it now costs you very likely millions of dollars. That's a massive issue in this country, and it shouldn't be that way. And the super PACs, along with things like Big Pharma and other lobbyists, etc., are the biggest part of the problem. And when it comes to foreign policy, I've expressed this before as well. I like the Monroe Doctrine. I've said that time and time again on this channel. I was very thrilled back in late December and January at Trump pretty much reinstating the Monroe Doctrine. I think that's excellent foreign policy. Let's focus on this Western Hemisphere. And I said this last stream, when it comes to Iran, where the fuck is NATO, right? Where's NATO? Where's our European allies? They should be dealing with Iran. We should be mildly assisting Europe. But Iran, if Iran is even the threat that they're made out to be, and part of me has a problem believing that, even based off of the past that we have in countries like Iraq and all of the shady, terrible intel we received on Iraq. If Iran even is a problem that they say it is, should not NATO be dealing with that? Why the fuck are we allied with countries like Europe if they're just going to sit by and do absolutely nothing? In fact, the only thing NATO has done this year so far is pretty much wage an attack against America. They've grandstanded against us by sending a measly, pathetic 50 soldiers to Greenland to stop Trump from invading it. That's all NATO's good for. They're not even our allies. So that's too much of a tangent, though. I want to stay on point here for the most part, but look up Eminem in the Epstein files. His name is mentioned. Those files are shit. Dude, the thing with the Epstein files, what's being revealed to us truthfully is that it's confirming what I said about Jeffrey Epstein. And I didn't want to talk about Epstein tonight. I'll talk about him either tomorrow or Wednesday. More information's constantly being released. I already did the episode on Epstein. What was it? Saturday. You can go check that out. I basically make it known that Epstein was Mossad. I mean, that's really the conclusion. If you read the official emails that we have now being sent to and by Epstein, a lot of it is all this, Mossad references, et cetera, et cetera. That's what Epstein was. It's not hard to understand this. Epstein, and he might have been KGB, he might have been MI6, he might have been CIA, he was intelligence. And what it seems to me is that a lot of these intelligence agencies are either working together or adjacently to blackmail powerful people to bend them to their will to fulfill their agendas, okay? That's really what that is. And so, of course, Eminem and Epstein knew each other. Epstein was a networker by design. His job was to get to know as many powerful, wealthy people as possible in order to bait them using barely legal girls, or in some cases, definitely underage girls, and then use that as blackmail to get them to do their bidding. That's what Epstein was. People can't see the forest through the trees. All they want to focus on is, well, Trump might have been guilty. Trump might have been guilty. First of all, he very likely wasn't. And second of all, you can't see the forest through the trees. It's so much bigger than that. But everyone's just focused on Epstein Island, pedos, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, that's true. There's just so much more to it. Hey, what's up? I missed who said that, but what's up? What's going on? That's how Epstein made platinum records with just two slightly good songs. Well, that's subjective opinion. I'm not a big rap fan. I think rap is mostly trash, in all honesty. I don't like the way it sounds. So much more to it, like what says Thomas Knoppish. Like I said, like the blackmailing. That's my whole point here. People weren't grasping that. They thought it was just some weirdo sex pest guy who lived on an island to himself and was just, a pedo. And it's like, yeah, but that's surface level. That's true, but it's a lot more. People don't understand that. Now they're beginning to. They're beginning to understand it. There's photos of Prince Andrew. There's now direct email links. I was going to cover this next time I discuss it, but apparently he had an audience with Vladimir Putin himself, right? He had an audience with the Israeli former prime minister, who was already rumored to have been photographed outside of Epstein's former New York City home. So none of this is surprising to me, but a lot of people don't really actually read up on the subject. They just let the headlines emotionally dictate to them what Epstein was, who he was, what he was all about. When you actually read into it and research it for a couple of hours, you really get a feel for what's going on. You really understand what Epstein was. That makes way more sense to me, says Scruffy 901. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you just honestly have to read it. You just have to look into it for literally like 15, 20 minutes now with all the new info we have, all of his personal emails. There's no denying it. Hey, Shadow Warfare's in here. 117, one of my older, more loyal viewers. Not a fan of the jab, I don't trust it. Yeah, us purebloods, right? Gotta stay pure blooded. I'm so privileged that I stayed pure blooded. I'm so thankful to be alive. I was told I should be dead by now. You're never gonna make it. What do you mean you didn't get your booster? I didn't it's like, bitch, I didn't even get the first or second one. And I'm still alive. It's a miracle. By God. By God, I don't know how I'm alive. All right. Anyways, back on point. Ed Martin, the DOJ, Todd Blanche being a registered Democrat for all of his life, now working as the number 2 guy in the Trump DOJ. How the fuck does that make sense? Back on point, though. The correlation that I'm seeing here, and I've said this before on this channel, I've been saying this for weeks now, this Trump administration is going to soften its stance on everything heading into midterms. That aggressive stance, all of those campaign promises that he was making, everything that he did from last January to March, where everybody who voted for him was in absolute love with him, when he was getting stuff done, that's all come to an end now, or at the very least will be put on pause for a long time. Because with the midterms on the horizon, they're now worried about PR. They're worried about their perception, public perception. That's the most important thing. They're worried about the independence, and they're worried about people judging what's going on, especially when it comes to ICE and immigration, but also when it comes to deep state arrests. And so I think they have the complete wrong approach here, but that's really what's happening. And that's why I draw parallels with what happened to Ed Martin today. Excuse me. What happened with Ed Martin today being sidelined, Trump's attack dog, sidelined. The guy that was supposed to be the number 1 guy leading the way and really stirring the pot when it comes to getting us the deep state arrests that we want, draining the swamp. This is the guy, sidelined. Well, who else did the Trump administration do this to very recently? Right out of Minnesota. His name's Greg Bovino, and he's the commander at task or commander at force, whatever the title was. Border Patrol guy, leading the way in Minnesota when it came to rounding up illegal immigrants. Greg Bovino pulled out of Minnesota and moved back to California just the other week by this Trump administration. And for kind of the same way, kind of the same personality type here, right? Greg Bovino and Ed Martin, they're both attack dogs. They're the bulldogs within this Trump administration. They're the guys that hear the campaign promises. They're the guys, they're basically one of us. They're the guys that hear the campaign promises. They're the guys that see the Trump agenda. They're the guys connected with the will of the people when it comes to the popular vote and everybody who voted for Trump to get done what he promised he would get done. And they go out and they do their best. That's the theme here with these guys. That's what this was. And now they're both sidelined, and it's all because of midterms. This Greg Bovino thing was a disaster because ultimately what we have going on in Minnesota, I've explained this before, but Trump was doing that to try to make a deal with the Democrat Party as a whole to avoid what is going on right now, which is a partial government shutdown. He pulled Greg Bovino out, a guy who was known as a hothead, a guy who was known to take his job seriously. He wore his long trench coat like the Gestapo, and the Democrats ragged on him for it. He was a no-nonsense kind of a guy. He took criticism for calling his boys the mean green. He took criticism for saying that the ICE agents and Border Patrol agents were the real victims in the Renee Good and Alex Preddy incidents, because they kind of were. You know, they're the ones actually on the receiving end of danger trying to fulfill the agenda that the people ultimately voted for. And now Greg Bovino's out. He might be retiring, which is soft firing. I've explained that before. But he's back in California now doing absolutely nothing. And it's a tragedy. And it's a tragedy because I've said this before too, that this Trump DOJ, this administration is toothless. And the last pair of fangs that they had left in Greg Bovino and Ed Martin, it seems they're just content to rip those out as well, so that they're not doing any harm now in order to, for whatever reason they think, win the midterms. They think they're going to win the midterms doing this. And it's so beyond frustrating. The fact of the matter is, I saw this on Rasmussen's report page, Mark Mitchell. All of Trump's campaign promises, the popularity by percentage and the approval of Trump's campaign promises, like immigration reform, deep state arrests, etc., releasing the Epstein files, all of those are currently infinitely more popular right now than President Donald Trump is himself. And it's because President Donald Trump has taken his foot off the gas pedal on everything he promised. People actually still overall want the promises that were made to us. The immigration reform, the mass deportations, is still approved by anywhere between 55 to 61% of Americans, depending on what poll you refer to. Yet here we are, they're taking their foot off the throttle when it comes to mass deportations, and Trump saying we're going to get out the worst of the worst. That sounds sweet to your ears, but just understand what that really means when they're pulling out Greg Bovino, when the Trump administration, the executive branch, while they control Congress, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, mind you, they literally have complete control of this country for the most part, is making deals and capitulating to governors like Tim Walz and mayors like Jacob Frey in Minneapolis, saying, okay, fine, we'll take Greg Bovino out of state. We'll sideline him. He's too aggressive. Okay, fine. We'll pull out a lot of the ICE agents from your state, a lot of the Border Patrol agents from your state. Okay, fine. If a Border Patrol agent at a red light runs a license plate and it comes back that there might be an illegal immigrant in the car, so long as they don't have a criminal past, a violent criminal past, we won't pull them over. That was a rumored report from what Trump agreed to. Okay, fine. We'll end our campaign of retribution on you, Tim Walz. We'll stop looking so deep into you and your administration there within your state when it comes to Somali fraud. Please just give us access to the state prisons. As if they should have ever needed to ask. Because I've said this before too on this channel now. Immigration reform, immigration policy is a federal law. And so states that get in the way and impede that don't have the state right to do so. It shouldn't take asking permission to go into the prisons to round up the illegal immigrants, to send them to Alligator Alcatraz, and then to deport them. It shouldn't take that. But for some reason, this administration feels like they need to make deals. And I've said this before too. Not everything is an art of the deal. Sometimes you just got to wield your fucking power. You just got to say, this is how it's going to be. We're doing it. Take us to court if you don't like it, but it's happening. Go kick the doors down to the prisons in Minnesota. Find the illegals and get them out of our country. That's what we voted for. And instead, they just surrender and they sideline their best, like Ed Martin and Greg Bovino. It's a toothless administration. And the best of the best sounds sweet, but really what it means is we're done with mass deportations. We're not going to get rid of every illegal immigrant. And Trump has said this verbatim almost. He said, direct quote pretty much, well, you know, I was the one who told them, you got to go easy on our farmers. They're hiring these illegals who just want a better life in this country. And, you know, that's what he said. He openly admits pretty much, we're not going after all of them. The farmers need them, apparently. Those could be American jobs, but that would mean paying the workers more, which of course would mean our prices would go up. And getting rid of all of the very likely 22 at least million illegal immigrants out of this country would temporarily tank our GDP. It would look bad for the economy. It's a sacrifice play that the Trump administration, and really for that matter, any administration, wouldn't be willing to make. It was never going to happen. But even at a somewhat respectable pace, it's not going to happen now. Only the worst of the worst. And once they're out, then what? That's the question at this point. So that's what's going on there. Just another sad example in this DOJ of somebody actually trying to get shit done and ultimately being sidelined for it. And it's becoming a running theme. Those, like I said earlier, those who are the most loyal to Trump or were the most loyal, especially like we have the Steve Bannons. We have so many examples of this. Michael Flynn, all these people, where are they? They're nowhere to be found. Not within the administration, at least. And there's something a lot deeper at play there. I gotta wonder sometimes if Susie Wiles is responsible for that. I don't know. But that's where we're at with that. I'll take a look at some comments before I move on to the next story here, which is Dan Bongino. Because, it does, this Dan Bongino returning the podcast thing, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about him, in future episodes or anything. But it correlates with this as well. It's like the second part of the equation here when it comes to this unserious administration. Oh, we got Shadow Warfare again. He says, Rudy, their streets are too busy, burning to be paved and all. Patriot, go work. Tell your friends to go work there. Yeah, actually, that's funny because that's sort of what Dan Bongino said on his podcast the other day, but we're going to address that. You can say that. I don't know why it's saying I hate. Why would it ban somebody saying I hate pedophiles? See, that one too. No one gives a shit about your opinion, asswad. I'm a free speech absolutist, so if you want to call me an asswad, you can. I don't know who you are, so I'm not even bothered. I'm actually more bothered that it's hiding your chats. I think that's outrageous. States never impede immigration enforcement. Yeah, well, yeah. Tell that to Tim Waltz. What are you seeing? Who said that? Squishy Lobster 111. What else do you see happening in Minnesota? They're creating a color revolution by design in order to galvanize their voter base, and they're weaponizing their voter base against people. I mean, one of the Democrat politicians just yesterday literally said that you should put your body on the line to defend these undocumented migrants. Openly saying that. It was some woman. Couldn't even be bothered to get her name. I was just outraged when I heard it. I should have wrote down her name. I'll look that up. I'll discuss that in my next episode, though. That's what they're doing. Okay, they are resisting the federal efforts when it comes to immigration enforcement. Sanctuary cities by design do that, by the way. Sanctuary city status should be lifted. It shouldn't even be a thing. And any state that openly is declaring sanctuary city status still should have martial law imposed on them and should be invaded by a federal U.S. military force, send in 10,000 soldiers, and storm the streets at that point. You want sanctuary city status? Okay, you're going to have soldiers walking up and down the sidewalks on every city street until you lift that status. And any illegal immigrant they find is going to be rounded up and sent to Alligator Alcatraz to ultimately be deported. That's the kind of heavy-handed tactics that I think a lot of, especially young voters, want to see the Trump administration do. But we didn't even get that last year. We're certainly not going to get it this year with midterms on the horizon. They're too afraid. They're afraid of losing the independent votes. You're the fucking best, bro, says Warren Fudge 4960. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now if you haven't already. And for everybody here, 63 viewers, 22 likes. Get these likes up. Helps the stream in the algorithm. Hey, bold as a lion. Hey, I saw your chats after the fact. I just wanted to say it was funny reacting to your chats. It was very funny. I know you're criticizing me right now because you agree with some of my stances, but then you hate my stances on immigration, martial law. So it was funny. You're like, oh, I thought this guy was MAGA. And I definitely don't identify as MAGA. I thought this guy was MAGA, but actually he's pretty base. He's going off. And then as soon as I say, we should declare martial law, send the soldiers in, go door to door, you're like, what the fuck? I was laughing my ass off, bold as a lion. You're welcome here, man. I don't listen. You say, listen to this guy rant is painful, and no one is debating in the chat with a brain. Good night, y'all. Well, good night, bold as a lion. It was funny to have your name pop up back here because your chats the other episode were fucking funny to reread, man. They were hilarious. Sanctuary or communist communities need to be called what it is. Yeah, exactly. 1 cup, 2 bears, 365. Totally agree. Who are you talking about, Gregory Young, 5429? You personally have not obeyed marijuana laws by choice. I've never smoked that once in my life. Yeah, I literally don't smoke. Are you talking? Maybe you're talking to somebody else in the chat. Absolutely, Grape. If we were stuck with these morons, we'd all be paying $50 for eggs while being told the prices have never been lower. Well, that might be true, too. Greg, are you talking about me with the marijuana shit? You must be. I literally don't smoke. I've never smoked in my life. Like, marijuana is for it's for losers. There's nobody you know in your life successful that smokes marijuana. That's for a reason. Bro, your takes are bipolar, but I like how you're still kind. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. I mean, listen. At the end of the day, I care about America and I care about Americans. And my takes may feel bipolar because I'm not a traditional toe the line party establishment hack. I despise my Republican Party, in all honesty. I'm very ultra conservative, but I want a good America for Americans. A lot of people won't buy that, whatever. They'll criticize me for it. I want good prices for Americans. I want an affordable housing market. I want law and order. And I think that's the part that turns people off like you. It's like when I'm discussing the law and order, I know I'm discussing it from a lens that's scary to a lot of people, but we need law and order in this country. We need a restored country that's available for Americans to thrive in again. That's my stance. I'm an American advocate. I'm a nationalist. Is really what it is. Okay. Hey, Greg Young. Most people I don't really ban too many people here. I'm not going to ban you, actually, but if you're just going to keep saying I smoke weed or do drugs, I'm going to put you in a 30-minute timeout so you can go sit in the corner. You can jerk off to the photo of Kamala Harris that you have in your bedroom. Do it while you're on your knees like a good boy. And really think about, after you get that post-nut clarity, I want you to think about what you did today in my chat and how you defiled it and how you levied falsified claims against me. Disgusting behavior, Gregory. Disgusting. I'm ashamed of you. Both your mothers are ashamed of you. And you really need to think about your actions tonight, okay, buddy? When you come back, by the time your timeout's up, this stream will be over because I'm going to cover Dan Bongino and then call it a night. But when you come back, if you come back tomorrow, I expect an apology out of you, young man. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed, says Mr. Joking 2121. That's exactly right. I'm like the father that he never had because he has two moms. I smoke and have a good job. Maybe some losers shouldn't care what I do in my own home. I do not care what you do in your own home, but I do have my opinions on weed, and I'm not changing them for anybody. Don J, you seem like a winner. Who's Don J? I don't see. Gregory is convinced. Yeah, Squishy Lobster. He was like super convinced. He's like, no, you're wearing a hoodie in your car. That must mean you smoke weed. Like, hey, maybe it's just a little cold out where I live, okay? Retired at 48 years old and smoked pot until the day I retired, so your take on weed is wrong. Well, say what you want. I have my take. I'm not changing it. There, I did read your comment, Huey. Okay, anyways, wanted to move on. Let's move on to Dan Bongino here. He returned to podcasting, and in some ways, in my opinion, this really does tie in with the fact that Ed Martin and Greg Bovino have been sidelined. It does tie in almost with this narrative that I'm building here, which I believe is the correct narrative on the Trump Department of Justice, on the Trump administration as a whole, right? Dan Bongino, the guy who spent all of the COVID years, all of the years during the Biden administration, ranting and raving about everything, especially the Epstein files. But on top of that, at one point testifying about the Secret Service, if I remember correctly. This guy was outspoken, high energy, assertive in his beliefs, and seemed strong-willed, passionate about his beliefs. This guy seemed like he knew his shit. This guy seemed like the kind of guy you wanted in a position where he could do something about it. And every conservative's wet dream at the time came true when we saw the Kash Patel and Dan Bongino duo be approved for their positions, be appointed to them. And so it seemed like we were going to have the most absolutely fire, take names and no prisoners kind of FBI here. And ultimately, we haven't gotten jack shit. Dan Bongino returns to his podcast and ultimately just misses the mark all across the board with everything he goes on to say. Dan Bongino, first and foremost, he said pretty much right off the bat, from what I listened to at least, little disclaimer here, I didn't listen to the full episode. I don't have time throughout my day to, but I listened to literally 33 minutes of it. So I listened to a lot. And Dan Bongino, in the segments I was listening to, this is how he explains what he took the position for. And I think this is the beginning of the copium here, right? Let me switch some water again. He says that he took the position to test himself. He said, we all need to test ourselves. That's why I took this position as the deputy director of the FBI. I took it to test myself. And so immediately my thought process was, what do you mean? Like, why you didn't take it to you didn't take the position to figure out how right or wrong you were on Epstein. You didn't take it to achieve true justice on behalf of the American people. You didn't take the second best position in the FBI and one of the top positions in the Department of Justice to actually get shit done, to make deep state arrests, to expose the truth of the Epstein files, to work for the people and actually deliver on promises and deliver on the statements that you had made while you were podcasting. You took it to test yourself. There's a lot of ways you can test yourself in life. Why would you take an important role like that just to test yourself? That I don't understand. As a man who's ambitious, I understand what you do is a test, but ultimately I make my decisions for much more than just testing myself. I make decisions based off of the actions I feel like I can achieve in those roles, in those positions, doing what I'm doing. It's all based off of the result that I feel like I can get. And if I don't feel like I can get a good result, guess what? I don't take the position or I don't do the task. I find somebody else who's better suited for it. So that was my first thought right off the bat. Then he goes on to almost literally cry about his wife. He goes on to cry about, he's talking about his wife who's apparently sitting in front of him. And he's like, oh, I can't be brought to tears so soon. Talking about my beautiful wife who was put through hell while I took this position. What did you expect was going to happen, Dan Bongino? What did you think this was going to be? Skating in a park somewhere? This is a serious position with serious implications, and we were counting on you and Kash Patel to get the job done, which they ultimately didn't do. And then he wants to sit there and cry about his wife. And part of the reason why he became a podcaster again, according to him, is he missed his family. And you know what? I'm going to say this. It may offend people. I don't care. Ultimately, a lot of guys go about life handling their women this way. And they handle it in a way where it's like their women and their family become like the ultimate nerf. As a single guy, I view a lot of married men, I view a lot of men who get in relationships, and it's like, you're nerfed. You're nerfed by your own woman. And it's a shame when it comes to somebody like Dan Bongino, who literally speaks fire into a microphone during 2023. The guy's on fire, talking about Epstein, talking about how he didn't kill himself, encouraging us to never drop the subject, saying, don't let this go. No matter what they do or say, don't let this subject go. And then within 2 or 3 months, gets in front of the cameras on the news and says he killed himself. He killed himself. I saw the files. What do you want me to say? He killed himself. And then months after that, there are hoax the files. They didn't exist. There is no client list. Dan Bongino, of course, didn't say that himself, but Kash Patel had to testify to that, and so did Pam Bondi. They're liars. And we have all of the information being dumped now because, thank God, the will of the people was victorious here. Rare W. We got what we actually wanted because of people like Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ro Khanna, a Democrat, coming together to create the Epstein Files Transparency Act that was almost unanimously agreed upon, voted in favor of by Congress, with one person voting no out of hundreds, out of over 400. And then Senate, of course, approved it, and President Donald Trump was cucked into signing it. But there was the Trump administration the entire time telling us, do not believe your lying eyes. All of the stuff you've read about the Epstein files on the internet over the years, it's all false. He was just a creep on an island. He liked underage girls. That's the extent of it. There certainly was no client list. You don't need to dig deeper into this. And he definitely killed himself. That's what they were telling us, this DOJ. And Dan Bongino was a willing part of that. And he had to have, at some point, in my opinion, sacrificed his dignity to go along with that narrative. And now everything being released to us, I think, in my opinion, confirms that. But there he is crying about missing his wife. There he is talking about how he took the position to challenge himself. So right off the bat, not a good start to what I heard. But then he goes on to say that once he was in that position, he realized that he was only ever faced really with two choices, a shitty choice or a shittier choice. So my next leveraged criticism at that point would be, if you're only faced with a shitty choice or a shittier choice, maybe you're not meant for the job. Maybe you don't have the capability to really think about how you can achieve what you need to achieve. Are you telling me that no matter what happens, you can only make bad choices? That doesn't really seem to fit. That doesn't really seem to me like somebody who's cut for the job, competent for the job. Can you imagine a president running on that for a campaign? Well, imagine Trump. Well, I just want to let you Americans know, if you vote for me, I'll only make the shitty choice every time, not the shittier choice, okay? That's what you'll get out of me. If you vote Kamala, she'll always make the shittier choice, but I'll just make the shitty choice. What the fuck? Who says that? And it's just so patently false. There were, believe it or not, non-shitty choices. A non-shitty choice would have been to say, hey, here's the Epstein files. We're going to make them public. We'll redact the names of the victims, and everything else we'll leave wide open. Have at it. That would have been the right choice to make. And I know Dan Bongino ultimately couldn't have made that choice on his own. But again, he sacrificed his dignity. And there's always a small part of me that feels pity for him. I think he was a passionate guy. I think he believed in what he was saying in his podcasting years, to peak 2023, I'd say. That was probably his generational run, 2023, Dan Bongino, on fire. I think he believed in that. I think he was truly on a mission then, and I think he thought he could change stuff. He did give up one of the most successful political podcasts in America, paying him no doubt way more than what he made as the deputy director of the FBI. So I will say that. I'll say that right off the bat. There's a part of me that pities the guy. But ultimately, you choose your own fate. And he chose to sacrifice his dignity, in my opinion, from what I've seen, because it seems like he lied to us willingly, or at least he went along with the people who wanted to, like perhaps Kash Patel and Pam Bondi. So that's also what he said. Then he says that he knows his position means being disliked, and that the guys at MSM, mainstream media, were always criticizing him without knowing anything. So that's his next leveraged complaint, and really the war that he now seems to be waging as he's returned to podcasting. He hasn't returned to podcasting to talk to us about the inner workings of the FBI or the DOJ. He's not there now to talk about what's wrong with the system. He's not there now to talk about why he couldn't get done what he wanted to get done. He's there to complain about the mainstream media and how they control the narrative, how they don't know anything. He ultimately goes on to say that they can pucker up their lips and kiss his ass. That's how he treats it. But that's kind of the new war that he's waging. It's not about Epstein anymore. He can't talk about Epstein anymore. Not his entire podcast, but a large part of his podcast before he took the position was about Epstein and how it was a scandal. And now that he's dropped the ball, he wants to go back to podcasting where he makes all that money and has all that attention, and he needs a new war to wage. And so now he's choosing to wage that war on mainstream media and on a few other things that I'll get to in a second here. I'll take a look at some comments again. Seems like he found out what was really in the files and ran, says me 2222. Yeah. It seems that way with a couple of people, doesn't it? Like Dan Bongino's not the only guy, because Kash Patel was also really fiery on that stuff. His tone changed completely as well once he took the position. And he's also not the only one either. I mean, you can think about several people in this Trump administration right now where it seems like they're not who they used to be. That even includes Pam Bondi, for that matter. When you look at Pam Bondi's work as the Florida State Attorney General, she was a different person almost. They're all different now that they have these real positions. It almost seems to me like they find out what's really at play. They find out who's really running things, whoever that may be. They find out how things really work. And there's an intimidation factor there. Because in that interview, I'm sure most of you in this chat know what I'm referencing here. In that interview where Dan Bongino swears that Epstein killed himself, he doesn't look like a guy who's comfortable talking about the subject. He doesn't look like a guy who's happy with the body of work he's put out thus far at that point. And neither does Kash Patel. They both look like, in all honesty, I mean, they're sweating, first of all. People have zoomed in to show that. They're sweating in that interview. And it's not because it's not because the stage lights are a little too hot. They're sweating and they don't look happy. They look scared. They look nervous. I wonder why that is. Kiss the Ring says Lance Hendricks 49.97. Yeah. Pam Bondi is in the files, says Barry. I haven't seen that, Barry Felton, 5162. I have not seen that. Me too, agrees. Yep, exactly. Yep, absolutely. Trump releasing the files redacted. He hasn't, though. Trump's name has not even really been redacted in any of the files. Trump is not going to wind up being implicated in the files. I've got bad news for the liberals here. He's not going to be implicated in them. That's a prediction I've made from the start, and as time goes on, it just continues to be more and more confirmed that way. He's not going to be implicated. The only thing that was able to be mustered up from him that's in the files are literally anonymous tips and like third-party accounts. Not happening. The reliable info, though, comes from Epstein's emails. Anyways, where was I here? That's right. So then, Dan Bongino, after crying about his wife, after saying he only ever had two choices in his position, the shitty choice or the shittier choice, after saying he only took the position really to challenge himself, he then goes on a long-winded statement to discuss all of the achievements that he made that the mainstream media that he had just got done complaining about a few seconds prior to this didn't give him any credit for. And I wrote down some of the ones that he discusses. Excuse me. He says, well, we fired a bunch of corrupt FBI agents. I'm summarizing this. This is not a quote of Dan Bongino's, but these are the achievements he listed. He even had a picture of all of the articles up. These are more obscure articles, of course, for the most part, not mainstream media. So he says, we fired corrupt FBI agents. There was a $15 billion Bitcoin scam that we investigated and took care of. We never got credit for that. He says there were 0 illegal migrants that crossed the border during this Trump term within the first year. We got it down to 0. He said Kash Patel reassigned 1,500 FBI agents outside of the D.C. area, essentially to mean, by the way, that they were moved out into the country, dispersed to do what they're supposed to do as FBI agents, rather than sitting in corporate offices in D.C. to wage lawfare against political opponents like they were doing during the Biden regime, of course. And then he goes on to say, we've had the lowest homicide rate in decades now, et cetera, et cetera. And then he goes on from there to say, well, there are 4 main groups of people that I want to address. First and foremost, he starts by thanking his supporters and quickly reminds them that good cases take time. And so in the context of thanking those who supported him, he reminds them and everybody basically by saying, and this is an underlying message. The underlying message here is, the reason why there haven't been deep state arrests is because this shit takes time. That's really what this comes down to. Good cases take time. That's what he says. And so he says it's a slow, methodical process, what they do at the FBI. And he said, compared to the mainstream media, which isn't fair to us, they're all quick headlines and sound bites that the liberals eat up and believe, and the doomers, which he talks about in a second, they all eat those headlines up, but they don't know what's actually going on. It's a slow, methodical process. It just takes time, guys. That's why we haven't gotten a single deep state arrest. But if you reference that back to the Biden DOJ, and you look at just everything that was accomplished under Joe Biden in his first year with his DOJ, the results are startlingly different. There's quite the contrast. So I beg to differ, Dan Bongino, because I got to see what an effective DOJ looks like and how it operates, at least to some degree. You can say they never actually got Trump. They charged him with the felonies, whatever, but they never got him. But nevertheless, they got people around Trump who actually did go to jail, got arrested, frog marched, everything, perp walked, jail time, etc. Trump had to pardon some of them when he got sworn in. So that's what an effective DOJ looks like, actually. And so the whole it takes time stuff, you shouldn't be buying that at this point. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, we're literally coming up on 1 year now, and we haven't gotten anything except Don Lemon. We got a botched James Comey case. He wasn't perp walked. He wasn't humiliated like Trump's first-term supporters were when they were getting arrested. He got to walk in through a side door, sneak in, plead not guilty, and leave. And that's the end of that. Letitia James was ultimately either sabotaged by Pam Bondi or blundered horrendously after she illegally appointed counsel to oversee the case that she shouldn't have. So Letitia James walks. And Don Lemon arrested. Ultimately, Don Lemon's not going to jail or prison. I think everybody knows that. But that's their claim to fame. That's their biggest accomplishment inside of 1 year. An independent, disgraced former mainstream media reporter arrested. But big cases take time, according to Dan Bongino. He goes on to say that the second group of people that he wants to address are the liberals and their media pals, and that's the part where he emphasizes, you should just kiss my ass. And he says, I didn't go into this DOJ with any partisan intent, yet the liberals still weren't happy. They're still ungrateful. They still didn't treat me fairly. Yeah, bozo, that's part of the problem, honestly. What side do you think is good in the good versus evil battle happening within our country right now? Why would you ever go in without partisan intent? Because the Trump DOJ is supposed to remain neutral? The Biden DOJ was anything but neutral. And this is what makes me so sick of my own Republican Party. They're still playing off of these virtues. They're playing to the rules of a game that the liberals aren't even playing anymore. So you go in without partisan intent because it's the right thing to do, and now you get to openly say that to make yourself seem more virtuous. Truthfully, it just explains why you didn't get anything done. It just adds to the story of how nothing real got done. He can say all he wants about finding missing children. That's wonderful. Arresting all of the drug dealers in this country. What was it, 4,000 of them? That's wonderful. 0 migrants crossing at the border. That's actually amazing. But that I credit more to Border Patrol than anything. Tell me about a $15 billion Bitcoin scam. Great. Those are like everyday tasks, though. That's like the bare minimum. That's the expected stuff. I hate to be rude. I hate to come across as one of those possibly mainstream media guys, which I'm not, obviously, who doesn't know anything and just talks according to Dan Bongino. But I'm just giving you here the lens on public perception. We expected this administration to have teeth, this DOJ to have teeth. We expected actual deep state arrests this time around because Trump has nothing to lose now. We expected the actual mass deportations. It's all the rug's being pulled. And we're not even getting some of that from the start. People like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino folded within a month. But that's what he wants to say. He wants to say, well, I went in not with no partisan intent. Well, that's a fool's errand at that point, really. The Democrats don't play by those rules anymore. They're outdated. It's an outdated game. The Democrats play to win. The Republicans play by the rules. Big difference. So, third and foremost, this is where he doubles down on what he said when he was exiting his position as deputy director of the FBI. He says, I'm coming after the grifters. He goes on to say that this MAGA movement has been hijacked by doomers and black pillars. He ironically says that the doomers, they sit around and complain all day, but they haven't done shit when it comes to fixing the problems of the country. He goes on to say, I left my podcast to do something about it. But the irony here is he quit. He quit as the deputy director of the FBI within 1 year to go back to talking about it. But then he wants to complain that the doomers, all they ever do is talk about it. Severe irony here going on with Dan Bongino. The guy literally got the position that would have afforded him the ability, in correlation with Kash Patel, to actually do something about what he spent all of COVID complaining about on his podcast. He didn't get any of the mainstream tasks done. He did minor stuff, expected stuff. Then he decides, I miss my wife and my family. I miss my podcast. I'm quitting. So he quit so he could go back to talking and bitching and complaining about stuff that ultimately he chose to not get done. That's where I'm at with somebody like Dan Bongino right now. And I said I feel pity for the guy. Truly, I do. He gave up the podcast originally. I think he believed he could get something done. But ultimately, he's made the choices he's made, and now he's in the position that he's in. So he wants to sit there and say doomers sit around and talk all day. They didn't do shit to do anything about it. He's made the same choice, basically. I think Dan Bongino is a closet doomer. I think a lot was revealed to him when he took his position, and I think he's scared, and I think he became a doomer after seeing everything from the inside, similar to Elon Musk. The only difference is Elon Musk isn't afraid to openly say it and talk about it on the Rogan podcast. Elon will openly tell you now, it's all fucked. It's all fucked. Dan Bongino wants to avoid that. Dan Bongino wants to go back to his podcast, make money, complain about doomers, grifters, black pillars, and the mainstream media. That's the copium here in full effect with Dan Bongino, in my opinion. But here I am just talking about it, I guess. So, disregard my opinion because that's apparently all I can do. And the part of the problem here, there's a twofold problem here. First and foremost, many of us would love the opportunity to actually do something about it. But guess what? We're not going to get that opportunity. Dan Bongino was handed a 1 in a million chance, basically, to become deputy director of the FBI. So he wants to say the doomers just sit around and talk and bitch and moan and complain and never actually do something. Where? Tell me, Dan, how do I become deputy director of the FBI? Tell me. I'm there. Tell me. Not the everyday man doesn't get these opportunities, okay? That's another part of the problem. But that doesn't mean we have to sit around and shut the fuck up about stuff either then. I'm doing the best I can personally, for instance, on this channel to complain about the stuff I feel needs to be complained about. I would love the opportunity. Snap my fingers and make me the president. I'll tell you right now, this country would look a lot different. Maybe it's a good thing that I'm not the president, though. But, I'm just letting you know. It's not because we don't want these opportunities. It's because we're never going to get them, most of us. So what else can we do? We're a republic. The premise of that is voting for our leaders, making our voices heard, etc. So I'm doing my part as far as I'm concerned. And someday I may have the status or wealth or both to do more. But for now, unfortunately, talking about it is all I can do. And it's all any of us can really do. Dan Bongino was a 1 in a million, afforded the position, and ultimately deciding he missed his wife too much. And he couldn't handle it. So he quit. So he can go back to talking about problems rather than actually being in the position to solve them. And then on top of it, he wants to talk about doomers. Who created doomers? Not just Dan Bongino, but he's one of the common denominators now. We had to watch Dan Bongino and Kash Patel go on TV and deny the fact that Epstein killed himself, deny the fact that the Epstein files existed in the form that we're now getting them in, ultimately. We had to watch these guys who were hailed as the outspoken, release the Epstein files now kind of heroes, do a complete 180 within a month of taking their positions pretty much. Why do you think there's more doomers now and black pillars, Dan? Do you think you played a part in that, perhaps? I do. I certainly do. So, I just, the nerve, in all honesty, it's kind of hypocritical, in all honesty. But, and then finally he goes on to complain about the leakers, Dan Bongino. That's the fourth crowd that he addressed on his podcast, from what I saw. Like I said, I didn't watch the full episode, but I watched a good 33 minutes of it, and he complains about the leakers. And this is probably not news to anybody, but when he got in, he said the FBI was split, divided, and there's people in there leaking sensitive information and undermining the efforts of the good ones in there, undermining the Trump DOJ, the administration, deliberately sabotaging stuff. Doesn't surprise me. So, and you know what? That's on them. They have to sniff those people out and get rid of them. Kash Patel has fired a bunch of them, but that one didn't surprise me. He addressed them as well, though. And that's, to me, the summary of Dan Bongino's return to the podcast world. And it ties in with Greg Bovino being pulled out of Minnesota and Ed Martin being laid off from his role as Trump's attack dog, because on the flip end, you have a very performative and unserious administration that cares more about appearances, perception, and talking points instead of getting stuff done, because they're either too chicken shit to get it done, they're incompetent and can't get it done, or both. And this is the result you get. You get a guy like Bongino who looks like he could be able to get stuff done, talks like he could be able to get stuff done, perhaps is actually competent, but for whatever reason, behind the scenes, it's made clear to him he's not going to be doing that, and so he quits. He quits. To go back to simply talking about what's wrong with the country rather than trying to fix it from a rare position that most Americans will never have. So it's performative on one end, and then on the other end, you try too hard. Now you look bad for the administration with the midterm. You're at risk of being laid off. This is where we're at right now. No more mass deportations, only the worst of the worst. No deep state arrests. Ed Martin tried too hard. He's gone. He's gone. Laid off by Todd Blanche, a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat who's the assistant attorney general in this DOJ. This is what we're dealing with. This is the grim reality of the MAGA movement right now. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to reveal all this to you. Be sure to like the stream right now, by the way, if you haven't already. Subscribe to American Advocates for more streams and content like this in the future. And make sure your post notifications are turned on when you do, because then it'll notify you when I'm live. Quitter loser says Miami pushed to the limit. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's harsh, but that's true. When it comes to Dan, that's how I view it. And truthfully, as a deputy director, I think it can come and go in 1 year little stints here. But if Dan Bongino actually cared about getting stuff done like he said he wanted to, he would not have quit. And I don't care that he has a wife or kids. A lot of men in this country have wives. They have wives and children, and they go out and they get the job done anyway. It's not about that. It's not about being closer to home all the time so you can be with your kid 24/7. Okay? It's about doing your purpose in life as a man, fulfilling your God-given assignments, and going out into the world and actually getting something done. And Dan Bongino, to use his wife as an excuse and to use, the fact that he misses home and that he only was faced with a shitty choice or a shittier choice. It's like problem solving, okay? You miss your wife and kids. Well, it's only temporary. And then, you're only faced with a shitty choice or a shittier choice. That to me sounds like you're lacking problem solving abilities. And I'm speaking totally ignorantly on that. I don't know what kind of problems he was facing, but it's like, there's advisors, there's other people. You can group together. Groupthink is powerful. Come together, discuss ideas. What do you mean you couldn't ever muster up a good choice to make? You only had to make a shittier choice. That doesn't make sense. Not a good thing to say. Not good for PR. Scruffy901 says, please look up the Havara agreement. Very important information to know. I'll take a look at that tonight later. Thank you, Scruffy. Me Too says, Todd Blanche works for Trump, not a Dem. No, he's been a lifelong Democrat, Me Too. He was a New York State registered Democrat up until 2023. Then he represented Trump against the Biden regime pretty much and switched sides to basically conveniently become the second in command of the DOJ. I'm telling you, I think Todd Blanche is very shady. He didn't work for Trump for a long time. No, I tried to research that myself. I didn't see that. I saw him representing Trump when it came to the Biden lawfare and everything that was happening in the 2021 to 2025 era. But I didn't see that he's been like a lifelong friend of Trump. I even typed that in because I was wondering. It's like, how else does it make sense that a lifelong New York State Democrat is in a Republican administration as the number 2 DOJ guy? It doesn't make sense otherwise. Good morning from very dark and cold Sweden. Wow. Hello, Tommy. Hello to Sweden. Nobody hates Sweden, So Sweden's always welcome here. In fact, I wish Pam Bondi would be unassigned from her role as Attorney General and assigned instead to be an ambassador to Sweden. I think that's a role that's her a lot more. The reason I'm a centrist, I hate both sides equally, says that Pitbull Love 5176. I feel ya. I almost am tempted to agree with that, but I'll still say I'm a conservative through and through. It's just I can still, as a conservative, I can still hate the Republican Party too, So we agree on that, I think it's very clear which side is which, and, I think it's more important than ever to take a stance, but, you got to come to the realization that both sides are pretty rough right now for different reasons. Shadow, thanks for the confirmation. Sub, says PTS Demon. I don't know what's going on here. I should probably make Shadow the first mod on this channel, but I don't know how often he'd be able to tune in. Shadow's a long-time viewer on this channel, so I appreciate him. I've only found kind friends from Sweden. Yeah, absolutely. The Republican Party is gone, says Shamian USA. Well, listen, this is something I haven't addressed on this channel yet. Maybe I'll make a standalone video that's not live and cover it, but it's not unheard of, and it wouldn't be the first time in this nation that parties have been dismantled and reborn, rebuilt even, right? I think it was the Tories and the Whigs back in the day. So eventually, it seems to me that these parties are running their course in the direction of self-sabotage to the point of where they just might not exist very soon, and they might need to be renamed and restructured even. And I think a lot of people would support that, actually. I think a lot of people from both sides would each support their prospective parties being dismantled and rebuilt. Because on the opposite side, you do have very moderate people who are more Democrat who look at their extreme liberal left, far left, radical lunatic party, and they go, what the fuck is this? I'm not voting for this anytime soon. And definitely on the Republican side of the party, I think it's less common on the Republican side right now because you have a lot of people cheerleading for Trump. You have a lot of people that just vote for the president and that's it. But anybody who really is paying attention is not thrilled with Republicans right now either. You know, the conclusion that you really have to come to in this country right now is our representatives aren't representing us. They're representing something. They're representing multiple things, but they're not representing us. And that is overwhelmingly true, I think, currently in 2026. George Washington didn't party. Well, of course he didn't. I mean, that was so early on in American history. Trump was an actor before. Trump was an actor before he was ever a president. Before that, he was a salesman and a businessman. And a lot of what he does is actually in the framing of that, the art of the deal, the way he operates. I appreciate his tactics, but his strategy is so lackluster. And there's a difference between tactics and strategy. On top of that, not everything is a business agreement. Sometimes you just have to wield power. Power should not be negotiated with. Power is absolute. And that's where Trump really goes wrong. He's not wielding power when he needs to. Everything to him is compromises and negotiation, like it's a sales deal. I like that when it comes to geopolitics in a lot of ways, or geostrategy when it comes to trade, right? But, you know, sometimes like Law and Order, you don't negotiate with a police officer who's about to arrest you for, you know, stealing or criminal mischief. You don't say, well, can you not arrest me and give me a ticket instead? No, you stole. You're getting arrested. You're going to jail. You're going to be booked and go before a judge. That's Law and Order. And with Trump, you know, Law and Order also is like immigration, for instance. Trump is trying to negotiate on things he shouldn't be negotiating on. We were promised a dictator, damn it. Where's our dictator? But in all seriousness, law and order and power should be wielded absolutely in many cases. Trump doesn't seem to believe in that. Trump seems to have the soft approach like every other Republican does. Republicans are afraid of wielding power, is really the problem. And some people thought Trump would be the exception, but I think it's being revealed over time that he really isn't. He's not a great businessman either, says you. I mean, me too, let's be honest. Trump owned like dozens of buildings in New York City. He was very successful. And yeah, I think it's 4 bankruptcies, but either way, bankruptcies for sure. Trump's all over the place in his lifetime when it comes to his successes. But the fact that he was able to bounce back from each one of those bankruptcies also tells you something about him and his ambition and his willingness to succeed. So that's a give and take right there. I'm not gonna criticize the man's personal life. All right, when you hold up a magnifying glass to any one of you, it's like, how many of you right now are sitting in a room the size of a closet eating ramen and tuna? You're poor. You just got laid off from your job. Your car's breaking down. So let's not go too far to the point here. We're all here talking about Trump for a reason. Trump's successful. There's no way around that. That may piss people off, but he's successful. You don't become the president of the United States without being able to be labeled as successful. Okay, Trump will literally go down in history. Most of us won't. But it's not that I'll disagree with some of that either. It's funny. I mean, he had a casino that went bankrupt. So let's also, let's not pretend that that's not the case either. Some of it's just undeniable and funny. What else do we got here? Supposedly Trump and Hillary Clinton are distant cousins of King Edward III. Oh, maybe King Edward III was that was over thousands of years ago, wasn't it? Am I remembering that wrong? I think I just saw something about King Edward III. Maybe the chosen people won't let him go. All right, what's going on? A lot of brain rot chats here, guys. Come on now. My father also didn't give me millions of dollars when I was born. Trump only got a small loan of $500,000. Plenty of bad people have gone down in history. They have. It doesn't make them any less great. They just might not be of a good, morally upright character. But they're successful. I'll tell you that much. I didn't grow up spoon-fed like Trump either. Let's talk about our national debt, though, says Red Arrow Plays 4538. Most of it isn't even from the government. Most of the debt is owned by private corporations. And yeah, that's not good either. That is really not good. Here's my take on our national debt. We're at a point right now where I don't think it would be reasonable to ask them to buy all of it, but NATO should just be assigned chunks of our national debt per country that exists within NATO based off of the last 67 years. NATO's been around for 77 years. It was only supposed to be around for 10, though. So it's been around for 67 years too long, and they've completely taken advantage of America, our military might. The deal originally was, hey, we don't want Russia to conquer you after World War II. We understand you have no military at this point because we wiped you guys out and decimated your society and economy. So rebuild your society and economy. We'll protect you for 10 years so that once your society and economy is rebuilt, you can then strengthen your own military and deter Russia from sweeping across all of the European nations and conquering all of you. That was the original deal. General Eisenhower even went on record saying if NATO is around for longer than 10 years, it has ultimately failed. Yet here we are 77 years later, and they still depend on us for military protection pretty much. They still don't have a very respectable military, not as individual countries. And even when they combine all of their military might, it's still pretty embarrassing. And on top of it, their societies and their perfect socialist society is protected by the military. They still cheapen out on their national defense fund, still love our US dollar. So and they've been cheapening out on their national defense fund. So really what we should be doing is going to those countries and saying, hey, this is what you owe us. You're going to buy up that in our national debt, and it's going to be a permanent purchase. That's it. End of story. That would really help lower the national debt. That's what we should do. And upon pain of threat of us saying, okay, you don't want to pay us back, I think we're going to start closing down some of those military bases on your border near Russia. And those 100,000 soldiers we have there, we're going to start pulling those out. We actually need those on the Western Hemisphere now. We got shit going on with Venezuela. In fact, we really want to focus on the Pacific region of the world now because of China. So they're going to move to the other side of the world now, Europe. We should be negotiating like that. I just don't understand what we're doing sometimes as a nation. We're so powerful. We're the world's hyperpower. And we pussyfoot around with these other countries that pretend to be our allies, but truthfully aren't. Very small loan, me too. Yeah, I knew you'd find that funny. That's how that's how it's referred to as, though. It is funny. Brain rot chats, brainless chats. Yeah, perhaps. I love the USA. You can become rich one season and next you're eating out of a trash can. Yeah. Well, don't get over leveraged on debt and be careful about the investments you make. That's very important. You know. Don't be over leveraged. Debt can be a wonderful thing. You got to know how to leverage it correctly. A lot of wealthy people go bankrupt because they're over leveraged on debt and they literally drown in it. So, dude, you are living in your car. Pathetic. Dude, I sleep in my trunk. You should see my trunk. It's got a mini fridge in it. It's amazing. I bet there are many poor people that are way happier and less stressed than Trump. Doubt it. Poor people are miserable. They have massive headaches. They're always behind on their bills. They're not doing well in life. When they get injured, it's a catastrophe. They have to go into debt usually. They're usually figuring out how to buy food for the week. Life is not good for poor people. That is for sure. That literally doesn't make any sense. Isn't it based on population size? Are you talking about my NATO plans? We're paying off the debt. The Federal Reserve is dead. We're moving into a resource-based economy. Well, maybe. I'm liking what I'm seeing with the precious metals. I've been preaching on precious metals even on this channel for months now. I was telling everybody about silver back in September. Silver would have been a great investment. Copper, for anybody wondering, I'm not a financier. I'm not a professional anything. Wall Street, precious metals guy, none of that. I'm not a professional in any sense of the word. But copper is the play now. I'll tell you that right now. Copper's a long-term play, though. It probably will not shoot up like silver did. But, I was telling people about silver in September. Great investment. Gold, I've been telling people about for a year and a half, even before I had this channel. Copper is going to be the next play. We need copper, and it's getting harder to find, too. You're so deep with knowledge. Damn, good voice too. Thank you, 2009 Lifeguard. I appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. and leave a like on the stream. I'm just taking comments right now. I already did my episode part here discussing Dan Bongino and Ed Martin. You graduated from Trump University. Hell yeah, I wish. Also, it allows us to have military bases all throughout the world. I don't give a shit. I really don't. I'm done being the world's police. We need to... it's not that we shouldn't have a military presence across the world, but why would we protect allies that are ungrateful? We should let them feel a little bit of pressure. Bro acting like he should be advising the president from his car. Hell yeah, you know it. You know it, Victor, whatever your name is. You keep going and your audience will grow. I'm telling you right now. Thank you, 2009 Lifeguard. I appreciate that. The audience is growing pretty fast on this channel. I've gained like hundreds of subscribers. This channel's only been around since March 2025. I created it back in February, but I let it... You got to let the channel marinate in the algorithm for a month. So I started posting last March. And it was really a matter of figuring out the algorithm, you know? YouTube hates long form nowadays, but it loves live and it loves shorts. I hate YouTube shorts, though. I think they're the fast food content of YouTube. So I just kind of backed off from it because I had YouTube shorts go viral, micro viral early on, and it blew up my channel. But, you know, it brings in the wrong viewers, the kind of viewers that want to watch 30 seconds and leave. It's like, I don't want those kind of viewers. I want people that are actually interested in information and discussing ideas. And long form's not going to cut it, but live, YouTube Live seems to be doing the trick. Let me forward all the way up here. Replacing the copper and brass pipes in your house with PEX not only will pay for itself with... All right, no offense, I don't really care. We don't have many allies left anymore. Listen, Unicorn Mullet, let me say this. I've been advocating for this now for the past couple of weeks too. Our current allies on paper are not our allies at all. NATO grandstands against us every single chance they get. They're scum. They take advantage of us. They don't deserve us. The UK, not a great ally. Canada, not a great ally. We should just encourage Alberta to secede at this point, recognize their sovereignty, and make deals with them to acquire their oil, and honestly, pretty much cripple Canada at that point. We should have just taken Greenland from Denmark. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Denmark would fold every single time if the pressure was really applied to them. And, you know, it's true. But we have allies in the waiting, and we should be recognizing them. Now, Trump with this Board of Peace thing, I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure where he's going with that. But one of the things we should be doing is looking at the countries that actually like us. Japan, El Salvador, Argentina even. I know people were upset about Trump bailing out Argentina with the money, but we're actually making money off of that arrangement from them. And Malay tends to say very based things. He hates liberals. Anybody who hates liberals is a win in my book. So we have Argentina, El Salvador, Japan, and also Italy. When it came to NATO sending troops to Greenland to openly defy us, our allies doing that, there was one country that didn't do that. It was Italy. Giorgia Meloni. She's the exception to the rule when I say women shouldn't be in politics. She's the exception, and probably not even if I take a closer look. But at least doing that proved to me that some countries out there actually still like us a lot and want to work with us. And so those are the countries that really we should be looking at and forming a new alliance with, new partnerships with, especially a country like Japan. Now, South Korea is on the fence for me. South Korea we should be looking out for, perhaps, but they're starting to push anti-America propaganda in their country, so you got to watch that. But Japan is going to be so valuable to us in the future if China heats up as the global threat everyone makes them out to be. Japan would be like the way we treated Israel in the Middle East wars. Japan will be our proxy point, and they love us, and their prime minister loves Trump and loves America and wants to work with us. So that's how I view that. Yes, our current allies are not real. They're phony. They're fake. They all hate us. And I hate them. I hate them. I think we should lift sanctions off Russia, and I think we should get friendlier with Russia. It was a big mistake to drive Russia into the hands of China the way that we did. Trump did that in his first term. Biden annihilated that and really sealed the deal by weaponizing our global reserve currency against them to the point where Putin was startled awake, basically, and said, holy shit, we cannot, I shouldn't say holy shit, just shit. We cannot allow the dollar, global reserve currency, to be weaponized against us like that. It forced him to go to Xi and say, we need to bypass the American dollar. And they've been doing that ever since. That, to me, was perhaps one of Biden's biggest mistakes. And Trump made the mistake, I think, originally of even sanctioning Russia. I think people care way too much about a country like Ukraine, which is a corrupt country. It's a divided nation. The West wants to be Russian. The East wants to be European. Split it in half. Go full Korea on it for all I care. And that ties in with the Monroe Doctrine again, which I'm huge on. We really should be taking a much more laissez-faire, absent approach from that part of the world, truthfully. We should trade with them. We should keep a military presence there because we're the world's fucking hyperpower, a true empire. So we should keep a military presence there, but we should just not be getting involved the way that we're getting involved there. Now with Iran, but also just continuously with Ukraine. It's just, I'm over it. I'm just over all of it. And we do need new allies. A big cause of inflation is fractional reserve banking. He says it ain't our business. It's our business, but how we handle it, we don't need to be handling it the way that we handle it all the time. That's why I say when it comes to Iran, where's NATO? That's the eastern part of the world. Whoever's our allies there in the east should be the one leading the charge against countries acting up. So if Russia and China are a problem, I expect NATO to be handling that. NATO and the UK, they're supposed to be superpowers. So where are they? When it comes to Iran, they have nuclear capabilities again, or they're building towards it. That's terrible. Let's call NATO and see what they can do about it. NATO, Israel, and the UK, they're our allies over there. How about they handle it? How about we take a step back and we say, hey, if something bad happens, we'll send aid. We'll send aid. We'll send medical supplies. We'll sell you weapons. Good luck. Why can't we do that, though? It's because our allies have taken advantage of us now for years. It's ridiculous. Yes on Ukraine, definitely, says 2009 Lifeguard. If you're saying you want Russia, then you don't know Russia. I don't want Russia as an ally. I just want them as less of an enemy. I think they're a boogeyman. Scott, whatever your name, Scott. I don't want them as an ally, certainly. That much is true. But I want us to divorce ourselves from the eastern part of the world more, and I don't think Russia is the enemy they were sold to us as. The Cold War was decades ago now. It's time for it to end. There's a lot of value in trading with Russia, and there's a lot of value in not allowing Russia, or forcing Russia, rather, into the hands of China, the true threat of the world, in my opinion, right now. Russia as an ally? No, I'm not in favor of that. But sanctioning Russia to death, weaponizing our global reserve currency against them, no, I think the time has passed for that as well. Davson says, I agree. I was saying that to the person questioning it. If you are probably. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I can't see every chat. The chat's coming in a million miles an hour, so. Do you think the pharmaceutical industry and food industry know we are being slowly poisoned all by design? There's a lot of coincidences there, BFG. There's a lot of coincidences there. It gets to a point where you're stacking coincidences, and it does make you wonder, doesn't it? FEMA works closely with NATO. Well, you know what? FEMA is shady in and of itself as well, depending on which organization, which party is in charge of the nation. And to be honest with you, FEMA's ours. FEMA's for disaster relief. Whatever else they're doing, you read about them, it's like, what the hell? Shit, I want Russia as an ally. I don't know about that. I'm not sold on that. I don't know about that one. But we don't need to be their enemy anymore, is the point. This country will be doing so much better once you get a new Federal Reserve chairman. That guy in there now is a jerk. Yeah, I'm interested to see that. I'm definitely interested to see what happens when the interest rates are dealt with more appropriately and everything. The Federal Reserve has a new guy. So apparently the guy that Trump assigned, what's his name, Kevin something or other, he's going to clean house. So that'll be interesting. A little scary. Could go wrong. But we'll see. We'll see. If Skamala was as informed as you are on international affairs, she might have had a chance, but I'm glad she failed. Me too. Me too. She would have been a disaster. An absolute. I'm so critical of Trump. I can't stand what he's doing, but overall, I think he's under-delivering. But Kamala would have been infinitely worse, that's for sure. I just also am at a point where I hate saying that, though. I want a candidate that we vote for that actually does the job and does it right and puts America first and corrects everything wrong with this country, or at least tries to. So I'm sick of saying that too. I hate the lesser of two evils argument, and I hate saying, well, at least it's not Kamala. It's true, but I'm just at a point now where it's like I hate having to say that all the time, you know? Your economy is screwed. We'll see. I don't know about that. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there is good Russians, but it's just like Iran or North Korea. I understand, Scott. I'm not advocating for them to be allies. I'm not saying, we should give them national security secrets and trade everything with them and, send our manufacturing there or something. I'm just saying time to lift the sanctions, time to repair relations with them a little bit. Maybe it'll stop them from diving so far into China's reach. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying I think it's unnecessary. That's it. That's my point with Russia. We got to take the power back, says Friendly Neighborhood Troll. Thank you for that. Epstein is the GOAT. Okay. With who? Just trust in God and have faith that he will do what's needed to improve your life. There's a lot more that goes into life than doing that, Stardust. A lot more. God is there. God has a plan, but you're ultimately responsible for going out every single day and acting on that plan, advancing the kingdom of God and doing his will. And when you do that, that's when the rewards come and that's when you start to prosper. So, yeah, a lot of top financial guys said we're screwed because of our national debt. I'm telling you, I'm looking at stuff and there's a black pill to be had there, but it's not finalized. We'll have to see what happens. We need a miracle, though. I'll tell you that. Most people in Russia are living normal day-to-day lives unaffected by the war. Many of them are nice, normal, hardworking people just like you and me. That's what I'm saying. We have to remember these are countries, and, not all of them are full of evil, wicked, corrupt people with a demonic religion. Russia certainly is not one of those. So, J.D. Vance is owned by Palantir. Do you know what Palantir is? I do know what Palantir is, and that's why I am shaded out by J.D. Vance. Nobody knows who J.D. Vance is. Who is J.D. Vance? What does he stand for? He changed his name, So I'm not gung ho on JD Vance like a lot of MAGA is. He's clearly being propped up to be the next president, and Palantir is not good. When you read about Palantir and what it does and how it analyzes AI and camera footage and creates sort of a guesstimation on every individual person and what their behaviors will be, etc. A lot of interesting stuff there. A lot of bad stuff, in all honesty. AI needs to be regulated on a domestic front. We need to go hard on it from a military standpoint, unfortunately, because every other country is. But domestically, we need some serious regulations on AI. And sadly, we're probably not going to get those regulations. I think Rubio would be better than Vance, maybe. But remember who Rubio was before this administration as well, Joe Pops. I'm not a huge Rubio guy either. I like him now more than ever. I do think he's doing good work, but Rubio's got that neoconservatism to him still, so don't forget that. Unless you like neoconservatism. I certainly don't, though. Not overall. I can totally agree on AI. Nice to find common ground, says Raspberries. Absolutely. There's still some bipartisan stuff we got to deal with, right? Cost of living, the economy, that's always going to be bipartisan to the average everyday American. And AI has to be regulated. It's taking jobs, and it doesn't have to be. The idea of replacing an actual living, breathing American in this country with a robot just because it's cheaper and more efficient, at some point we have to take a step back and ask ourselves, why? And that's probably the least capitalist thing you'll ever hear me say here. But, some things are just so out of hand. It's not that capitalism is a problem. It's that AI could be a massive problem. And ultimately, AI would destroy capitalism if it replaces everybody anyway. Universal basic income is what I foresee in the future, which ultimately will bring in wealth classes again. And we don't want that. That defeats capitalism. So AI must be regulated on a domestic front. Must be. I'm getting way off topic, though, at this point. So the whole point of this was Dan Bongino. If you guys are just tuning in now, be sure to rewind it or watch it back later. I'm going to sign off from here. This is the longest I've been live on this channel ever so far. I appreciate the good chats today, though. They're coming in well. Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now if you haven't already. leave a like on the stream. If you left a chat you wanted me to see and it was actually a good chat that is intelligible that I'd want to respond to, this video, this live will post as a video on my channel. You can go back and leave it as a comment. If it's worth responding to, I'll respond to it. But just know I do not cast my pearls to swine. So if you want to leave nonsense comments, I will just not respond to them. I definitely will laugh at them though. Even my haters are pretty funny in this chat. In prior streams, I was watching you guys make fun of the windows fogging up. They're like, my God, the windows are fogging up with his take. It's funny stuff. So I appreciate the hate. My haters are my elevators. But I appreciate the love as well from a lot of you guys down there. Thank you very much for that. Thanks for tuning in to American Advocates. I'll be going live tomorrow. We'll probably discuss Epstein, the government shutdown, etc. So like I said, subscribe and have post notifications turned on so that you get notified every time I post or go live. Thanks to everybody. Glory to America. God bless the USA, and God bless you.